Okay, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have you for our webinar on using the mobility metrics in our Upward Mobility Initiative webinar series. I think folks are continuing to join, but we'll go ahead and get started. I am Emma Fernandez. I'm a Policy Program Associate here at the Urban Institute in our Research to Action Lab. I'm so excited to welcome you to our webinar today. We can go to the next slide and I'll give us an overview of our agenda for today. So I am going to cover an introduction to our upward mobility framework. Then we're going to take a deep dive into our upward mobility data dashboard, which is a tool that you can use to use our mobility metrics in your local community. After that, we're so thankful to be joined by Dr. Chelsea Chapman from Fresno, who's going to share about her work locally incorporating the mobility metrics in Fresno's upward mobility work. We will have 2 opportunities for question and answer throughout this session, so please feel free to send your questions throughout. If you see on the bottom of the Zoom window, you'll see a little Q&A icon, and you can enter your questions in that box throughout the presentation, and we will address them during the Q&A sessions. We are also recording this webinar, so you can reference the recording after the fact on our event webpage. We will also be posting the slides on that webpage so that you can download and reference them in the future if you'd like to. Okay, before we dive in, we are going to do a little poll to get a sense of who is in the room here today. So we're going to be doing this using Menti. So you can access the Menti poll using the link that is in the chat. You can also access it on your phone using this QR code, or you can type in the link and the code that's on the screen. So I'll give everyone a second to access the poll either by this link, by the QR code, and pull up the first question. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Our first question, we're curious if the folks in the room today have previously attended an upward mobility event from the Urban Institute. So please go ahead and put in your response to this first question, and we get to watch live as your answers come in. Okay, lots of people coming for the first time. That's great. Welcome. We're so excited to have you here. And don't worry, I will be covering an intro and overview of our framework, so you will get all the background that you need this afternoon. Love to see that we have some folks returning who've attended dashboard events in the past, as well as other upward mobility events. So that's great. Thank you so much. We can go to the next question. I'm curious what type of organization folks in this room are coming from. So we have lots of different types of local actors that we work with in our upward mobility work. Would love to know what type of organization you are coming from. Okay, so lots of government folks and nonprofit folks, some philanthropy, research, private sector. Great. That's so exciting to see. I think that the dashboard can be useful to people across a wide range of types of organizations. So we certainly have worked with lots of local government leaders, lots of nonprofit leaders, as well as other advocacy, collective impact, and other local leaders and communities. Next slide. Okay, would love to know where folks are coming from. This is just an open-ended question, so you can type in your community or locality, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. We'd love to know if you're coming from a county, city, region. Cool. Hey, we have such a wide range. Is it possible to scroll? Can we see the new ones coming in? Cool. Yay. Okay, this is exciting. Love to see folks coming in from all across the country. Welcome. We're so glad to have you joining us today. All right, and then we'll go to our last question. So this workshop is going to be focused on using our mobility metrics, and would love to know what type of data role you are coming from, whether your role is mostly focused on data, you use data sometimes in your role, or more occasionally. Okay, cool. Looks like we've got a pretty even split between data focused and maybe slightly less data focused. That's great. We hope that this tool can be useful to a wide range of people, and you'll kind of get to see how, if you really want to go in depth into the dashboard for folks that live and breathe the data, we'll show you how to do that. If you just want more of the high level takeaways or key summary, we'll also show you how you can pull that key information. Okay. Thank you so much for letting us know who's here. It's nice to get a sense of who's in the audience since we can't hear directly from you, but we'll love to take your questions in the Q&A box. And now we have a little bit of a sense of who's in the room. So with that, I'm going to dive into an introduction to our upward mobility framework. So Nico, you can go to the next slide. Perfect. Thank you. So for those of you who are attending one of our webinars for the first time, this is our upward mobility framework. It was developed in 2019 and has been updated and improved since then to reflect a growing understanding of what it takes for a community to create the conditions to boost upward mobility and advance equity. And throughout the next few slides, I'm going to walk you through each component of this framework that's laid out here. But I also encourage you to visit our website to learn more about each of the components in more depth. Next slide. Thank you. So the first part of the upward mobility framework is the three-part definition of mobility from poverty, which identifies what it really takes for people to move out and stay out of poverty. What this definition shows is that economic success alone is not enough. People also need to feel that they have power and autonomy in their lives and that they are valued in their community and can contribute to it. This broader conception of mobility drives our work. And the three parts that define upward mobility are economic success, when a person has adequate income and assets to support their and their family's material well-being. Power and autonomy, when a person has the ability to have control over their life, to make choices, and to influence larger policies and actions that affect their future. And dignity and belonging, when a person feels the respect, dignity, and sense of belonging that comes from contributing to and being appreciated by people in their community. We actually held a workshop just a few weeks ago that focused entirely on the three-part definition, including an example from the city of Rochester and their local work. So if you'd like to go more in depth, I recommend you check out the recording from that workshop on our website. For most people experiencing poverty in the US today, opportunities to achieve greater economic success, power and autonomy, and dignity are blocked by longstanding structural barriers, not by a failure of individual effort. People of color are disproportionately impacted by structural barriers to upward mobility in the United States. So our framework emphasizes that a focus on racial equity and local upward mobility work is necessary to ensure that all people and communities can prosper. The next component of the framework is the pillars. People cannot surmount systemic barriers to upward mobility on their own. The upward mobility framework identifies 5 pillars of support that are interconnected and essential to mobility based on a review of evidence. So the first one, rewarding work, pays a living wage, provides dignified work conditions, and offers economic security. High quality education from preschool through post-secondary provides a crucial avenue to economic and social mobility. Opportunity-rich and inclusive neighborhoods play a central role in supporting families' stability and well-being. Healthy environment and access to good health care help people of all ages surmount life challenges and fully participate in their communities. And finally, responsive and just governance engages residents in decision-making and serves the needs of all community members with restraint and fairness. The next component of the framework is the predictors. So we know that for local leaders to improve conditions that lead to upward mobility and racial equity, they need to know what to change and how, and the predictors give communities that information. The predictors are 24 factors that are strongly associated with long-term economic success, dignity and belonging, and power and autonomy. In other words, the predictors describe the community conditions that support upward mobility. And so each of the 5 pillars has several associated predictors. Some examples of predictors include living wages, access to preschool, housing stability, access to health services, and political participation. And local leaders can measure the status of each predictor and progress towards improving it using our suite of mobility metrics, which is what we'll focus on in today's workshop. So now we come to the mobility metrics. And so for each predictor, our data working group of scholars selected 1 to 2 metrics that can be used to compare and monitor a community's performance over time. The mobility metrics are a way to take an aspect of the predictor and make it concrete and actionable. And no data source is perfect, but we aim to select metrics that best balance a variety of considerations. So we developed 7 criteria that we want our metrics to meet. Valid, meaning that it's well established or accepted in research and policy and is an accurate measure of the predictor. Widely available, meaning that it draws upon existing and accessible data for communities nationwide. Repeated at regular intervals, meaning that it's routinely measured. Geographically mindful, meaning that the metric is available at the city or county level and is less sensitive to resident turnover. Consistent across time and geography, meaning that it allows clear comparison over time and within and across localities. Structurally relevant, meaning it helps identify a systemic condition rather than individual level outcome. And finally, structurally equitable and inclusive of important subgroups, meaning that the metric helps identify structural equity in the community, acknowledging that people experience poverty and upward mobility differently. We look for the ability for the metric data to be disaggregated. So here you can see on the next slide an example of how the metrics align with each predictor. So this is the rewarding work pillar. And you can see, for example, for the employment opportunities predictor, we measure this by identifying the share of adults aged 25 to 54 who are employed. For the jobs paying living wages predictor, the metric would be identifying the pay on an average job compared with the cost of living. Each predictor across all 5 pillars has an associated metric like the ones showed here. So now that we've reviewed the framework, we're going to have an opportunity to walk through our upward mobility data dashboard in depth so you can see how this tool can help you use the metrics in your community. I'd like to welcome Claudia Solari. Claudia is a principal research associate here at Urban and leads much of our upward mobility data work and is going to talk us through the dashboard. Welcome, Claudia.
Thanks, Emma. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Great. So before I actually dive into the dashboard itself, I wanted to highlight a little bit more of the ways that you could use the metrics. So the metrics can help you understand recent conditions in your community across a range of predictors and how those have changed over time. And it can also help you compare your community with peer communities and national values, highlight interconnections across policies and social domains, reveal disparities across demographic groups, prioritize areas of need locally, set targeted goals for improvement, and then monitor your progress towards those goals. So in this demonstration, I'll be highlighting both the dashboard and some of our support tools, and you're looking at one of them right now. So this tool actually walks you through in more detail 6 of the ways that you can use the mobility metrics. But let's jump over to our main Upward Mobility Initiative website. Here, front and center, you have the visual that Emma just walked us through for the framework. We can go ahead and click on the dashboard. Now, the dashboard contains data on 26 metrics for all counties. That's about 3,140 plus, and about 480 cities. And you can see here that the dashboard is structured to mirror our framework. It's got matching colors. These are our 5 pillars. You can open and see that our predictors are nested within each of the pillars. And here you can, it defaults to selecting all of the predictors, but you can go in and select just the ones that you'd like to look at. Now, there are 2 ways to access the metrics data, and this is the first way by searching for a specific community. You can see here that the search is grayed out until I actually enter a place, and we're going to go ahead and select DC, which is where I currently am. Now the search function is live, and it takes me to the data. Now, this defaults to showing you the most recent year of each of the metrics that you've selected. Not all of the metrics are of the same year, so you'll want to be able to explore a little bit deeper to know what you're looking at. But again, here, if you've changed your mind, you can go ahead and select all of the metrics, and there they are. Um, these we call data cards, and you can expand the card in two ways, either just one at a time, or you can go ahead and expand all of the cards, and that opens up more information for you. So there's a little description of the metric. You can see your metric value, and it also offers this interpretation to help you be able to kind of put the metric value in a sentence. So in 2022, in the District of Columbia, 85.6% of adults ages 25 to 54 were employed. We also offer here a national median for a benchmark or comparison. But you can also add other communities into this to uh, compare your community to. So let's select Wayne County and say, I'm not sure I know what would be a good match for me. We offer you these suggested peers. So here are 5 suggestions. And those suggestions are based on information like geographic proximity, population size, and other demographic characteristics of communities. And now here I have both DC and Wayne County for all of my metrics. And I had pointed out that there was an interpretation here, and you can go ahead and toggle through. So now I can see the information for Wayne County. You also have more years of data. So the data card defaults to whatever the most recent year is. In this case, it was 2022, but I can also look at different years. We also have other subgroups that you can look at. In this particular case, we have 3 different groups, so you can look at the share of adults employed by disability, gender, and we'll go ahead and select race. Another feature we offer here, it's not for all of the metrics, but where we can, we have confidence intervals. So you can kind of toggle those off and on. That really just helps you better contextualize the certainty we have in each of the estimates. And as I mentioned, not all of our metrics have that, but every metric does have a data quality indicator. In this pop-up, you can see the value for Black non-Hispanics in DC. At the bottom of this pop-up box, it has data quality strong. Now, if any of the data points are of what we call weak data quality, that will actually be shown visibly so that you know to interpret that with some caution. So say you want to share this visualization with a colleague or friend, you can go ahead and click this share button. It will save the link to your clipboard, and you can just paste it in an email. Or say you want to take this beautiful visualization and put it in a PowerPoint presentation or in a report, you can click this download and it will generate a PNG picture for you. You can also look at this in table form. Here you can see more clearly what the data quality values are, what the values are, as well as those confidence intervals for each of these subgroups. And we also offer you the data sources and relevant notes. Great. We also offer trend information, so you can see how these data have changed over time. And actually, in the next dashboard update, we're going to have even more years of data. including the most recent year, which in many cases will be 2023. Now, say you want to better understand the nature of this predictor, how it relates to upward mobility, and some promising policy interventions. You can go ahead and click this Learn More link. And this highlights the relevant evidence on that relationship between the predictor and upward mobility outcomes. All of the sources are hyperlinked. We also have listed promising local policy interventions, again, also hyperlinked. You might also note that in places where this might actually interconnect with other predictors, that we highlight that as well. Great. So I had mentioned that there are two ways you can access the mobility metrics. Let's go ahead and return to dashboard. We'll let it load. And so below this, this entry point that was for specific communities, we can actually take a kind of zoomed out perspective and explore the mobility metrics across the country. My favorite starting point is just hovering over all of these counties across the country, and you'll see pop-up values. You can also change the year up here. This is not yet available for cities, so you'll see these for counties. But we can go ahead and let's look at Wayne again. And it's going to zoom in and highlight that community and put that mobility metric information in a sentence. You can also, individually click around so you can see that that's Oakland County. And one of my favorites is this chart view, which shows you the entire distribution of all the counties for this metric. And you can see where Wayne is on that spectrum. And as you hover over, you can also see all these other communities' values. And this is also available for cities. Now, say you forget everything that I have just shown you and you're not really sure what to do. If you go to the main dashboard page, you can go ahead and tour this page and it'll kind of walk you through step by step. And you can also click on the FAQ. There's lots of places to find the FAQ button as well. Great. So now you have seen your metric values and you can communicate that value in a sentence, but now you want to more like systematically think about what this is telling me about my community. So we do offer you guidance. If you want to explore your data, select the About Mobility Metrics. And here we have a support tool on how to examine your mobility metrics. It walks you through an exercise with questions step by step. It gives you some examples as well. And it offers you your own blank worksheet so you can really walk through it. Now, say you have other metrics that you're interested in, or the value of one of our metrics has inspired you, but you want to look at something slightly different and you're interested in finding local data about your community. You can go here to the Obtaining More Local Data. This is a pretty extensive list, but by no means comprehensive. You can see here that we have compiled 153 data sources and dashboards for you to look through. You can search key terms that will, pop up anything that mentions those key terms, or you can actually filter by, say, predictor. You can see here, and for every one of our 24 predictors, we have at least one local and state source that has data on related to that predictor. Great, so that's a really great place to begin. We also have other tools that are at your disposal. One thing I want to point out is this planning guide for local action. This is a step-by-step guide to help walk users through the process of generating a strategic plan. It includes some really key starting points like assessing your local will, identifying relevant stakeholders with decision-making power, and building coalitions. And this tool is actually being updated based on some of our most recent work and learnings, and that should be released pretty soon. So look for that. I'll also mention that the data in the dashboard are getting updated, which should be released in the next few weeks. And not only are we planning to add that most recent year of data, but we're also backfilling as many years as we can back to 2014 where available. And that way we can offer more insights into trends. And we also have some other updates that you can ask about in the Q&A if you are interested. We also have some sources for those that are a bit more data savvy on your teams. We have a GitHub repository, which is free, publicly accessible. That contains all of the programming code to reproduce all the metrics on the dashboard. And we also have all of our raw data files available on Urban's data catalog. Great. I am going to stop sharing and ask for the slides to pop back up. Great. Okay, so now that I've walked you through the dashboard, this is your chance to play around with it. If you haven't come up with any questions yet, I expect that you might have some coming out of this activity. So we would like for you to go ahead and go to the dashboard, and Katie is going to drop the link in the chat. Great. And this slide, we're going to leave this slide up for reference. It is guiding you through the exercise. So what we'd like for you to do once you're in the dashboard is to go ahead and enter your community and select a peer community to compare to. You can go into the high quality education pillar and select the access to preschool predictor so that you can try to focus on addressing these questions. So feel free to start the exercise right now on your own, but I'm going to go ahead and read the questions that we'd like for you to use the data to answer. So what percent of 3 and 4-year-olds were enrolled in preschool in 2021 in your community? How does this compare to the national median? And how does your community compare to the peer community you selected? Now, if you all have time, go ahead and play around a little bit more. You can look at the trend data. You can look at data by race and ethnicity, or you can click through more of the predictors. Just don't forget to expand your data card because that's got all the goodies in it. And you'll have the next 5 or so minutes to do this activity. Katie is going to drop some countdown reminders in the chat. So go have fun. 3 minutes. One minute left. All right, folks, we're ready to come back. I hope that was a useful exercise for you to get to experiment with using the dashboard. Next slide, please. Now we'll do a brief reflection to hear how that experience went for you. We'd like you to again access the Menti, use the link that Katie's going to put in the chat, or use your QR code or go to menti.com and enter that code manually. We are gonna see your responses on how you felt your engagement went with the dashboard in a word cloud. Can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So we'll be able to see it live as responses start to roll in. Interesting, great. Oh, satisfying. Love that. Practical. That's one of our goals. Awesome. easy, rich, useful, oh, thought-provoking, action-oriented. Guys, you're lifting me up today. Helpful, informative, fascinating, relevant. These are awesome. User-friendly, insightful, clear. And we got a fun, comprehensive, accessible. So appreciate that. And folks, we see all your questions coming in through the question and answer, and we'll be diving in shortly. Valuable, practical, enlightening, at a glance, action focused. Awesome. Thank you so much for engaging with us on that. And let's transition to the Q&A section.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Glad to hear that the dashboard is interesting, enlightening, helpful. We hope that you'll revisit this tool and can use it in the future. So we're going to take some of your great questions. We've gotten lots of good questions in through the Q&A box, so we'll address those now. So Claudia, we got several questions about when the data will be updated again and what is the most recent year available in the current data set. So can you share more about the timeline for updating the data?
Sure thing. So we do plan on doing an update to the dashboard and the mobility metrics at least once a year, with a release sometime around spring or summer. And these updates could include anything from getting the latest year of data available, to adding new subgroup categories, and adding new features and functionality to the dashboard itself.
Wonderful. So folks can expect to see that updated sometime within the next few weeks, we think, right?
Yeah, in the next 2 weeks. So a lot of our metrics, the most recent year of data is 2022. That is, lagged, but reflects the American Community Survey data. We do have some metrics where the data are a little bit older than that. Just depends on the source of data we use, which is a vast number and variety of data sources to calculate these metrics.
That was actually, you read my
Oh,
mind, Claudia. That's the
okay.
very next question that came in. So could you talk a little bit more about what are the data sources for the metrics? Where does Urban get this data?
Yeah, so most of them are publicly accessible data sources. We rely pretty heavily on the American Community Survey, but we do have other sources like there's a health resource data set. We use a data source from the EPA for air quality. That's the air tox screen data. We use CNT's data for the transportation access. Underneath every data viz on the dashboard, you will see the sources that we use specifically. So like the crime ones, we use the NIBRS data based off of information from the FBI. But like Emma had gone through some of the criteria on how we selected these metrics, and having data nationally available is a really important component, which doesn't mean that it's the absolute best data for you and your locality. So if you know of local data sources, we definitely encourage folks to access those.
Great. Thank you, Claudia. And I also just put the link to the appendix in the chat if folks want to check that out for all the detailed information about the data sources. So Claudia, someone asked, they live in a rural community, so what can the dashboard show them? None of the cities in their area have populations over 75,000. Does the county population need to be over 75,000 to use the dashboard?
Great question. So the county level, tried to calculate for all counties in the US. We are aware that some counties have very small population sizes, and that can lead to some issues in being able to report out the data, especially once you try to go into some of those subgroups. And so there, this is really a starting point for communities to access this. But for small and large communities, we encourage folks to try to access local data sources to better understand your local community. The demographic and other characteristics of your community might look different from the categories that we're showing you here as well. So there's a couple of things that you can do. One is to go ahead to our public GitHub. You can borrow our code, and you can, cater the code to be able to show you what you want to be able to see in your community. We also have our other local data sources that you can tap into and encourage you to really get familiar with what's available for your local community. And really, we encourage folks to engage in your own data collection. Reach out to your local universities to see what's at your disposal, but engage in survey data collection or other forms of collecting information locally.
Thanks, Claudia. We had a couple questions about other levels of data, of looking at data. So can you look at this data by zip code? Can you look at this data by census tract? Can you look at this data at the state level? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. That would be awesome. We wish we could give you absolutely everything. We don't have data by specific zip code. For some of our metrics, we use the characteristics of neighborhoods to be able to show you some disaggregations like um, uh, neighborhoods of color versus majority white neighborhoods. But that would require more digging on the individual's end to be able to see more finer grained. And then that goes for census tracts as well.
Um, Someone said that their city is over 75,000 people, but there's very little to no data available. Will more information be added later?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that. And really, year to year, this could change. Just if your population sizes are shifting. But we haven't had any concrete plans to try to share data on cities with population size lower than 75,000.
Great. Someone asked if we've thought about developing an index that combines across the metrics, either multiple or all of the metrics. I know this is a common question we get.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question because we toiled with that internally. And we landed on not doing an index because we were worried people would just sort of default to looking at that value, which could really mask what's happening metric to metric. Um, Indices have a lot of value add. It also, ranks communities, and so there's the appeal of that. But also, we wanted to make sure that communities can really see change. So if they're having, one new program or policy, that they'd focus on each separate predictor and metric.
Great. Someone asked for a little bit more discussion. You mentioned that the dashboard might show that a certain data point is weak data quality. Can you share a little bit more about what that means and what the criteria are? Does it vary by the metric or by the availability of a data source over time?
Yeah, so the weak data quality is kind of assessed metric by metric. We generally want to make sure that the the number of respondents involved in that calculation is greater than 30, um, because we're making a statement about an entire community. Yeah, it does vary metric to metric. And I think we have some information about that we can share if you're interested.
Great. Um, Someone asked, so in the race and ethnicity disaggregation, is there a place to see the breakdown of what the other races category means?
Yeah, we've really thought about wanting to, or how we might be able to share that. We do not have a breakdown of other races. I know that's a really big category, and it's certainly a much bigger category in some places over others. But this is where you could look into our code on GitHub, and you can see where we collapse it. You could just keep them separate and run the code for your community.
Thanks, Claudia. Someone asked, is there an API available for these data sets?
Not for our data. We use APIs regularly for, the original data sources these come from, but I appreciate that question and I will bring it back to the group.
Someone said they noticed that in several of the metrics, the data in their county was the same in neighboring counties. And some of those data points were labeled as weak data, but it was the same across like multiple counties in their area. Can you comment on why that might be?
Um, it's really, I'm curious which metric it is because it might be one of the transportation access ones. That one is a little bit more notorious for that. We are using, the original data from CNT on that one. Um, and, we're always going to be shopping around for any improvements for metrics. These are the ones that seem to be the best nationwide. So,
Wonderful. Okay, we have a couple sort of really specific questions about some of the metrics. So we can get into this a little bit and then I'll just invite folks if you have deeper questions that you want to ask us about, you can always feel free to contact us and we're happy to get back to you by email. But someone asked that the safety from crime card doesn't include national comparisons. Is that based on the FBI's data use guidance?
so in part, there is some guidance from FBI that warns about comparing across communities. Part of this is because, every community has their police offices organized differently, and like the way that they do reporting might look a little different. The other reason for not having national medians for that one is if the rate of like missing data or poor quality, the weak data is too high, we don't share a national median for that. In our FAQs, we are going to highlight exactly which ones we don't have it for, and it's the ones based on the NIBRS data and the CDC's neonatal health, because they only do that for really large counties. So we have a lot of missings there too.
Great. Someone asked, is there a way to further filter the data on jobs that pay a living wage to specifically analyze those without a college degree?
So the only subgroup we have for jobs paying a living wage is industry, and really the unit of analysis is the job rather than the individual.
Wonderful, thank you. Someone also was curious if this could be used to determine jobs paying a living wage based on race and ethnicity, and how to compare for different communities.
Uh, yeah, so similar answer because it's based on the job and not the characteristics of the people in the job. Yeah, one of the criteria that Emma had mentioned was like trying to get away from the individual level and really looking at a more structural characteristic of communities. So that's an example of one.
And then Claudia, if you don't mind, there's a couple things folks were hoping you could just show again on your screen. Do you still have that open? If
I
you could just
do.
show us a couple, how to
Where-
walk through a couple things again.
Sorry if I went too quickly on
No,
that.
no, I think it's just good to see a couple repeats.
All
Okay,
right,
can you show us how to see the national median when we're looking at a metric?
sure. So right here is the national median, and you'll see the dotted line on the graph. Here it is for living wage. I can,
Then could you show us again how we can navigate to the national maps?
sure. So if you're in the community level one, you need to return to dashboard. And this gives you, sorry, let me let it load first so you can fully see. So there's the search for specific communities. That's the first way to access it. And then below that is the way to access the map and the chart.
Thank you. And then, sorry, I should have done this when you had that screen open, but can you explain the confidence interval toggle a little bit more? What happens when you toggle that or don't toggle it?
Sure. There we go. Let's open one up. So when it's not on, you won't see the bar, right? So, oops, we have to expand the card. Here's where you can toggle the confidence intervals off or on. And here you can see we have 95% confidence that this point, 85.62%, is uh, it is the estimate. So the lower end, sorry, let me go to the table because it actually gives the numbers. So we're 95% confident it's between 83.8 and 87.4. You'll
Wonderful.
notice that some of these bars can be pretty wide. And so, especially when you're looking at, like, is my community different from another community, or is this race group different from another race group? If those bars overlap, then that suggests that there's not a statistically significant difference between those.
Thank you,
Sorry if that was too
Claudia.
much.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. So we're going to wrap up our Q&A here, but Nico, if you can pull up the resources slide, I just want to make sure everyone knows that we'll wrap up the Q&A on the dashboard for right now. You can continue putting in questions in the question box if you'd like to. And we also have lots and lots of resources that can support you as you are using the dashboard and using these tools in your community. So this slide lists lots of resources on the framework itself, on the metrics and the dashboard, and on the strategies and policy for increasing upward mobility in your community. One resource I definitely want to make sure we point you to is the FAQ for the dashboard, and we'll drop that link in chat. So if you're using the dashboard on your own, just remember that we have a very extensive FAQ document, and if you have a question about the dashboard, we hope that it has likely been answered in our FAQ. And if not, you can always feel free to contact us by email and we will get back to you. So with that, we are going to transition to our insights from the field section. So I'm going to welcome Carolina Ramos, a policy program manager at the Urban Institute, to kick us off for this portion.
Thank you so much, Emma, and thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. So I'm really pleased to introduce our featured guest speaker today, who will talk about local level implementation of the framework and the mobility metrics. This is a local partner that Urban has really enjoyed working with for several years, and it's an example that really showcases how organizations are using data to address really pressing questions about how communities are faring on their upward mobility efforts, how they're complementing the mobility metrics with local level data to get a more holistic picture of local conditions, and how organizations are connecting with a range of stakeholders to then put that data into action. So I'm really pleased to introduce Dr. Chelsea Chapman. She's a senior research analyst for the Central Valley Community Foundation in Fresno, California, which hosts the Developing the Region's Inclusive and Vibrant Economy Initiative, also known as Fresno Drive, which is a 10-year investment plan that focuses on economic, neighborhood, and human development. We will follow Dr. Chapman's presentation with a Q&A, so please share your questions in the Q&A function, and we'll get to them following her presentation. Dr. Chapman, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Carolina. Well, I wanted to get us started and kick us off by taking a moment to introducing you to who we are and what we do. So the Central Valley Community Foundation, we are a philanthropic community foundation, and we're working towards creating a just and thriving Central Valley. So we support the entire Central Valley region. So that's Fresno, Madera, Tulare, Kings, Merced, and Mariposa counties. People who live within Fresno and within the Central Valley experience some significant challenges when it comes to poverty and barriers to upward mobility. Despite being one of the nation's most productive agricultural hubs, our region experiences persistently high poverty rates, educational shortfalls, and a loss of skilled workers. We've had decades of housing inequality and environmental injustice that have left many of our neighborhoods with inadequate housing and poor health outcomes. Our Fresnans, they face a growing shortage of affordable housing, and this further deepens economic and social divides. So our team at Central Valley Community Foundation is working to correct these issues. And to accomplish this hard work, we rely on a system of collective impact. Next slide, please. So this brings us to our Drive initiative, which is a great example of our collective impact work. We are entering year 6 of our 10-year investment plan, and our plan leverages strategic programs that are based on community knowledge and skill set to achieve inclusive economic growth within Fresno and within the Valley. So within this Drive initiative, we have 14 primary programs, as Carolina mentioned, across our 3 investment areas: economic, human, and neighborhood development. These complex issues that I addressed within Fresno, they can't be solved by individual organizations working alone within silos. To achieve this difficult systems change, we need to work across sectors, and we do. We've built coalitions to link our CBOs with academic institutions, our city, county, and state government, and of course, centered are our community residents. But one of the keys to our success is having good data that informs our decisions. Next slide. We have a 3-level system of measurement and evaluation to ensure that our programs and our investment dollars are focused in the right areas. So in yellow, we have our traditional program evaluation. We conduct this annually and release an annual report. In green, we survey our initiative leads. So those 14 program initiatives within Drive, we survey them biannually on these 7 key constructs that exist in our Drive theory of change. These surveys and these constructs ask the questions that answer things like, are our programs committed to community engagement? Do our programs have the organizational capacity that they need in order to succeed? Are they promoting equity in their trainings, practices, policies, and promotions? And then finally, we have our blue level. This is our own local data dashboard that features the mobility metrics. This contains great population level data that compares Fresno to other geographies and tracks trends over time. Next slide. So how does our work connect to the mobility metrics? We realized that Urban Institute's upward mobility framework was so well evidenced and aligned nicely with our goals for our own region. In theory, our program should support our collective impact work and the goals that we've laid out, but we lack the population data to track Fresno's progress. We've used the data from the mobility metrics and found that this was key to tracking Fresno in terms of our ultimate goal, this inclusive economic growth in the region. Next slide. we knew we wanted to develop a locally tailored version of Upward's National Data Dashboard, featuring the mobility metrics with a few tweaks that made sense for Fresno. So we ended up collaborating with the Urban Institute. First in the team were collaborations with Gabe Morrison and Elena Stern. We worked with them to convene an advisory data subcommittee of local data experts within Fresno. And we met with them to determine what we might want to diverge from the national dashboard, and then what data was most important to feature in the local version of our dashboard, how to make adjustments to sources, features, the visualization, and really make this tool locally available and our own. Next slide. So after 3 meetings and a thorough beta testing of this local version of the dashboard, this happened over the course of a year. Fresno's mobility metrics data dashboard was born. Carolina dropped the link in the chat, and you can also use this QR code to scan in. Since that year process, we've continued to update and improved on it based on some audience feedback. So we've released the data dashboard and rolled it out to stakeholders, the community, different audiences, and we've received really important feedback that we're committed to implementing. So one critique of our dashboard was, hey, this is only available on the computer. I don't have a desktop, or my community residents don't have computers. We'd really like to access this from our phones. So we made that commitment and we updated our dashboard so that it was mobile friendly. All right, next slide. So you heard from Dr. Claudia Solari about the Upward Mobility Framework and how their dashboard is organized. She walked you through that entire process. But you might be wondering what tweaks were made from the national dashboard to our local version. So the first big differentiation was we organized our metrics differently than Urban. Urban follows the 5 pillars, and while these 5 pillars support the mobility metrics and the data that we're using, we decided to organize our dashboard website based on our 3 buckets of investment within Drive. So we fit our data and visualizations into economic, human, and neighborhood development. Next slide. We also ended up changing and adding to some of the mobility metrics. So for example, when it comes to effective public education, we ended up using the CAS, English language and mathematics achievement scores, instead of the national dashboard's Stanford Education Data Archive. We ended up choosing CAS because this data is more California focused and it's more often used by our education CBOs. It was also the racial disaggregation for this source and for this data more closely matched our Fresno population and our stakeholders' desires. For neonatal health, we added data on preterm births in addition to low birth weights. For environmental quality, we added some data on drinking water contaminants from CalEnviroscreen, in addition to having the air quality data. And for juvenile justice arrest, we used the California Department of Justice data instead of the FBI National Incident-Based Reporting System. There are a few reasons for this. The Department of Justice data was more California focused. It also consistently defined juveniles as under 18, which was very important to our CBOs and how the programs within Fresno were operating. So they were operating under the definition of juveniles as consistently under 18. We wanted data and sources to match that. Next slide. These changes in the development of our own local dashboard often aligned with feedback from specific CBOs who had subject matter and local expertise in those areas. For our effective public education metrics, we have a number of education pipeline CBOs that offered some great feedback and helped us decide on CASP as the source for English language and math achievement scores. We have a great initiative called Preconception to 5 that advocated for including preterm birth data. They work with expectant mothers, pregnant mothers, and then mothers postnatal, infants as well. We have our Community Justice Network initiative that advocated for the use of that California Department of Justice data for juvenile arrest. Water quality was a little bit unique. We added this because of Fresno's unique position for being in need of environmental change, not just to air quality, but to water quality as well. Fresno's drinking water contaminant score is 59.7% worse than the California state average. So we felt that this merited an additional metric and visualization. Next slide. So I won't walk you through the entire dashboard, but I thought I'd show you a few screenshots so that you can see some of the key difference in our local dashboard. Most of our metrics are disaggregated by race and ethnicity. You can see the color dot points that correspond to race ethnic categories in the key across the top. We have some really unique interactive components on this dashboard. So if folks were interested in just looking at Hispanic data, for example, they could click on the other data points in the key and toggle those on and off for a customized visualization and customized hover data. Our racially disaggregated data is visualized here as this great dumbbell plot. And this allows our users to view racial disparities by how close or far apart different racial data points fall. If you look from top to bottom, we have our geographic comparisons, which were very important for our stakeholders, our audience, our users of this dashboard. We start with Fresno because it's the Fresno Mobility Metrics Data Dashboard. And then that's followed by a California estimated average, Central Valley counties and cities, California counties and cities, and some other counties and cities across the US. You can see those geographic comparisons. For many of our metrics, we do have a toggle feature to explore city and county data. This one, though, just includes county. And just like with the national dashboard, we have sources and notes under each of these visualizations. We also have line graphs for Fresno over time data, and these are also often disaggregated by race. Next slide. Dr. Claudia Solari talked about many of the use cases for the mobility metric, the framework, the dashboard. Some of the primary use cases that we use our local dashboard for are highlighting areas of need, grant writing, advocating for policy change, assessing our programs, and then simply starting some important conversations. We are in the middle of performing a data update, and we saw a visible marked improvement in this metric that's pictured here. This is a metric on low weight births over time in Fresno. So from years 2020 to 2022, we saw a 3.6 percentage point drop from 14.4% to 10.8% in the share of low weight births among non-Hispanic Black mothers. Now, this was promising news and may reflect the impact of investments like those made through our DRIVE initiative in our targeted maternal health supports. Within Fresno, one of our DRIVE initiatives is the Preconception to 5 initiative. And within this, we have a fantastic doula program in Fresno that has support specifically for Black mothers. And this data validated the incredible work our programs that support our Black expectant mothers are doing. That being said, it's important to acknowledge that this interpretation doesn't account for potential confounding factors like broader public health trends during the pandemic, or perhaps concurrent policy and program changes that happened outside of DRIVE. But what it does do is spark the conversation and give us an idea of areas of investment and program focus that are changing. So what is going well and what still needs improvement This helps drive our decision making. So where will we invest in the future? What programs need additional support? And what programs are great mentors for others because they're doing so well? Next slide. So I'll go ahead and end with what our next steps are, where we plan to go from here. Right now, our team is being trained by Urban in the sustainability of the dashboard. Performing those annual updates on the local level is so key so that folks can have the most recent data and be able to respond to those trends and new updates. We are continuously sharing out our dissemination of the data dashboard. We call this our Fresno Data Dashboard World Tour. We have sparked many learning conversations with stakeholders in the region. We've had workshops and some community webinars in which we've invited a broader audience to first learn about the dashboard. Those conversations have kicked off, hey, have you spoken to this admin at Fresno State? Or let's get this into our local libraries. And from then we've met with other stakeholders and done more deep dive workshops or presentations. Our team and Urban have recently co-authored a fact sheet. This will be published and shared very soon. And then finally is using the dashboard. Our dashboard to date has been embedded in some curriculum in classrooms at Fresno State. It's been used by high schoolers. We have a cohort of 120 juniors and seniors at a variety of Fresno high schools that have learned about the data dashboard and used it during their health youth core work. That's civic engagement and research married into this really great extracurricular program. We use the dashboard to internally assess our program, but there is so much more we want to do. We'd love to see the dashboard used more civically for advocacy use cases. We're planning in the fall to kind of pivot from our original, okay, we're giving this dashboard to the academic communities, to let's really focus on building data capacity among our CDOs. So in the fall, we're going to develop and host some workshops teaching local CBOs, particularly in our disinvested neighborhoods, okay, how can you explore and extract from this data dashboard to write problem statements in grant writing applications? How can you extract data for advocacy, for bringing to your council members, for bringing policy change? So that's what is next on our agenda. And with that, I will pass it back to Carolina.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chapman. I feel like you preemptively answered a question that we get a lot, which is from communities or organizations that already have some kind of established framework or organizing mechanism for their work, and they're not sure whether the upward mobility framework is compatible or how to integrate it. And so I think you've done such a nice job displaying that that's possible. As a starter question, there may be communities on the line that are in the very early stages of getting started with their metrics work or exploring a dashboard. Where would you recommend that communities start, and what kind of capacities are needed for this work?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I would say the best place to get started would be with our process, which we've actually recommended to Merced, and they're starting their own local data dashboard as well. And that's convening an advisory committee. So throughout your programs work, your CBOs, if there are data experts that you know about or who know other data experts, get a group of them together and brainstorm, hey, what are our community needs? Talk to them about the upward mobility framework and see, all right, what could be useful from the existing mobility metrics, but then also what departures might you want to make that are specific to the local data community? And we really relied on our local data experts to say, hey, there's a really great source that works better for Fresno. Let's use that source. Or, hey, water quality is a huge issue within Fresno. Let's make sure that that gets on our data dashboard. So I would say convening local data experts, #1 priority to get started.
That's great. And I think also echoes something that we always encourage people to do, which is think of the upward mobility framework and the metrics as a foundation, and then complement that with local data that really meets your context. Could you speak a little bit more about that advisory committee and sort of who you sought out counsel from? What was your process for getting input on metrics? Not only from folks who are data experts, maybe policy domain experts, but folks who are representing different community interests.
Yeah, absolutely. So our Drive initiative was a really great place to start. We have a network of CBOs within that initiative. And so we talked to their leaders. We asked them, hey, are there folks within your CBO that have data expertise that would like to join the subcommittee? And then by word of mouth, they started recommending others. We just kind of went through, we worked with our comms team, and our comms team kind of gave us a list of like, here are all of our partners that we could potentially reach out to. And then it was a combination approach of like cold emails or warm handoff emails, inviting folks in our events, inviting folks on our socials and through our blog post. There were a number of different ways that we invited folks to join the advisory committee. And once folks had joined, we had kind of a core group, and we gave them homework between each meeting. And we had like very active, engaged meeting sessions where we were getting into the weeds on what's important for Fresno, what are the sources we can use. And that core group remained throughout the year, and ended up beta testing the first draft of the dashboard.
And you mentioned some of the outcomes of that advisory group, their influence on what elements of the dashboard appeared, right? So for instance, having a mobile version instead of just a desktop version, augmenting some of the metrics to build on the mobility metrics. Were there other elements of the dashboard that were influenced by that kind of continuous feedback from having an advisory group?
Absolutely. Racial disaggregation was extremely important. And so not only do we have the mobility metrics, and we also have like demographic information on Fresno that's very highly disaggregated. We have tree maps that go down to even really small subcategories. So we have a large Hmong population within Fresno. So we made sure to represent that in our demographic section. There are some new tools and directions that we're building out that we've heard from our CBOs. So like our civic infrastructure hubs within neighborhood development, they gave us some really great feedback on, all right, this is sometimes when we see data about Fresno, it paints a very dismal picture. And that's important work for getting grant dollars in and for, kind of flagging, hey, this is an area that needs change, but we also want to see some positive elements. So another step that we're going to start taking is asset mapping. So our CBOs have pinpointed on Google Maps locations of food banks and nurseries and other programs. So we like to build their asset map on top to our existing mapping tab so that folks can see not only where are their needs in the community, but where are their resources.
That's great. And can you talk a little bit about how you then get the word out, right? How are you sharing continual updates on the dashboard with the community, especially to ensure that they know that you're being responsive to that feedback? Like, we heard you on the asset mapping, we want to integrate it. What does your dissemination process look like? And I'd say especially for reaching folks across various sectors. I think sometimes we see that dashboards become tools of like academia and researchers. But as you're pointing out, there's really a benefit for broader community organizations to engage with this data to understand where there might be gaps, where there actually might be more resources than expected, that I'm sure can inform, strategies around their work or the type of funding that they pursue. So what does that dissemination look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. It's definitely been an iterative process. So we started with kind of like these large audience community webinars and workshops where we're inviting folks that come to our events through CVCF and through Drive. And through that, the first initial interest came from academic groups. So that was kind of the first audience we ended up targeting. So we made sure to integrate ourselves in like all of the local universities and libraries, and have those like learning conversations and like one-off presentations, working with the faculty to integrate our dashboard into curriculums, and working with high schoolers. So that was group one, and that took up a lot of our time. So I would recommend kind of taking it one audience at a time. Our next audience on deck is CBOs. So that's our plan for like late summer, early fall, bringing them in. We talked to a lot of our CBO initiative leads and asked them, hey, what are the needs of the local neighborhood CBOs? And by and large, they were saying, hey, we need more funding for the work that we're doing. And so our plan is to develop some workshops that cater to that need. So we're going to increase data capacity and show the CBOs, hey, this is exactly how you pull that data from the data dashboard and write it into your grant application, write it into your funding statement, the problem statements within those applications so that you can get grant dollars to keep doing the good work. So that is our secondary audience. And then we'll see naturally where that flows.
That's great. I feel like that kind of really actionable technical assistance helps bring tools like this to life, make them feel really practical. I want to jump back. We got an audience question to something that you spoke to earlier, Dr. Chapman, about some of the community feedback on racial disaggregation, particularly focusing on Hmong community members in particular. The question is, could you share a little bit more about the racial disaggregation choices you made? I'm curious why economic, household income, and employment data does not identify the Asian American population specifically. I assume this is absorbed into the other races and ethnicity category, but we also see that the data was collected based on the race and ethnicity overview.
Yeah, that is an absolutely great question. So it was really tricky, and we wanted to follow the same pillars that Urban did for selecting data sources. So we diverge a little bit in those like 4 additions of key data sources from like the national dashboard and what Urban is doing. But we wanted that these data sources to still be publicly available, accessible, highly trusted, updated annually, so that this dashboard could be updated annually and could be this trusted, reliable source. However, some of our metrics have different levels of race ethnicity disaggregation. So we chose to find the balance between, all right, this is a reliable source that's publicly available, updated annually, and has the most possible racial disaggregation. So some of our metrics, like effective public education, are highly disaggregated because California Department of Education does do a great job in disaggregating that data. But some of our data has fewer racial disaggregation categories, and that's a limitation of the data that's available. If you really want to dive into the weeds, when you're looking at ACS data, some of our communities are too small to get disaggregation at like the 1-year ACS estimate. So we might have to do our updates based on 2-year or even 3-year ACS estimates. It really just depends on the data that's available. But we are always combing through data sources. And if we can find a data source that hits those 3 primary categories, updated annually, trusted, publicly available, and has more data disaggregation, we will pivot and include that as a source.
Sure. I think it really speaks to some of the trade-offs when you're trying to make sure you have really robust criteria for the data that you use over time. I think we have time for one more question, and this is a little bit of a bigger picture question around the upward mobility framework itself. Would love to hear in what ways, if any, did the shape or sort of focus of your pre-existing work evolve as you considered the upward mobility framework? Did it alter some of the trajectory of your work, how you frame it? You've talked a lot about how you adopted the elements that worked for you all and sort of augmented that within your existing framework, but would just love to hear how the framework is informing Drive's work going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that the framework has kind of shifted our work in 2 ways. The first being that we've moved from more micro to more macro. So our other two levels of data collection are primary data collection, but they're much smaller. It's just evaluating our programs, traditional program evaluation, and then surveying our initiative leads, which it's a group. Our leads are about 40, so our initiatives are larger than that, but it's not population level, and we're not seeing how our region is moving or trending as a population. And so that was really key, getting to dive into the mobility metrics and use the upward mobility framework for that. The second kind of change and shift was that the upward mobility framework is more synergistic, I would say. So our initiatives are really used to building coalitions and working together, but kind of typically within those buckets. So the neighborhood folks are working with neighborhood folks, economic with economic folks. The upward mobility framework has started some really great brainstorming and new partnerships among our initiatives where they're working kind of across sectors. So like our economic development initiatives, like Career Nexus, which is this great program that's the employee and the employer of record they're at like 450 interns a year within Fresno. They're now working with neighborhood folks and CBOs to make sure that those in each neighborhood are getting these opportunities. And everyone is starting to get the understanding that upward mobility is accessible to everyone and that everyone should be using the framework to do so.
Excellent. That's such a good way for us to close out today. And thank you so much, Dr. Chapman, for one, just like the really impressive work that's happening in Fresno, but two, a really stellar example of what it looks like to take the framework, integrate it really meaningfully into a local effort and keep that work advancing. So thank you again. And thank you all for the thoughtful questions. And thank you, Claudia, for showcasing the dashboard. So as we wrap up, we want to spotlight some upcoming resources and events for you all to stay plugged in with Urban's upward mobility work. First, as Claudia noted, we do expect new data to be live on the dashboard in the coming weeks, so you can revisit the metrics that you looked at today, see if there are any trends that are emerging in your community, and continue to play around with the data. We'll also have 2 case studies coming soon, one on Fresno, offering a little bit more detail on what you heard today, and one about a collective impact organization in Tulsa, Oklahoma, looking at how both of these communities are integrating the mobility metrics in their work. Next month on May 30th, we'll be hosting another virtual workshop. We'll be showcasing a new toolkit for increasing upward mobility in communities. And you can find the link to register on the Urban Institute website on our events page. And I believe Katie is dropping that information in the chat as well. And finally, being the Urban Institute, we love a good survey. We would so appreciate your feedback on today's session. It really helps us inform how we develop our future workshops. So would really appreciate your feedback through the survey. There is a QR code you can scan, as well as a link there that we'll drop in the chat. Thank you again so much to our speakers and to all of you for joining us today. And we hope to see you at our future workshops. Take care.